Here's an interesting idea. Do you have integrity with yourself? Are you feeling whole from the inside out? Stay tuned for an interesting conversation, a new application, a new way to think about things. Hi, Shannon Waller here, and welcome to Team Success. In my latest 10X workshop, we have had phenomenal conversations around integrity, being trustworthy, what creates being trustworthy, all of the things. But an insight came out of that I really wanted to share with you. And a few people and things have educated me on it, so I want to give credit where it's due. So one of the things about integrity that my sister, Julia Waller, Ability Queen, has always said is integrity is about wholeness. So one of the comments I brought into the workshop was the definition of integrity, especially because and where it comes from. So if you go back to the Greek origin. So I want to share that with you. And the context of our conversation today is, again, are you whole with yourself? And I think it applies directly to teamwork, because if you are, you're going to show up one way. And if you're not, you're going to show up another. So let's go into really some of the root terms of integrity, and it may put a different slant on it than you're used to thinking about or hearing about. So integrity means wholeness, a state of being complete and undivided. The Latin root integritas, or integer, is another one. Integer means whole. I explained the math I was struggling to learn when I was a lot younger. So if integer is intact, whole, complete, you want to have integrity with yourself, which I think is really fascinating. It also includes moral soundness and an inner consistency where actions align with one's values and principles. When a person acts with integrity, they exhibit a unified character, being genuine and honest with themselves and others. And I want to talk about the with themselves part of this today. And a couple of examples have come up. A really close friend, entrepreneur of mine, has a team leader who he's just not being 100% successful in his role, even though lots of training, lots of skills, lots of talent. But it turns out it's really kind of not a match for how he is essentially put together. So I'm thinking, yes, profiles, my favorite, which is really interesting because who he aspires to be and what he aspires to accomplish is not actually part of his actual makeup. And I think that that's a challenge. And I've noticed that with our own company as well. When people really want something, we have the strong desire for a position, for a title, for status, for freedom within the company. You know, we're really highly motivated by that. And then, but intellectually, we may think it's a really good idea, but there's some part of our internal makeup. It could be your working genius. It could be your Clifton strengths. It could be your print, actually, that's kind of counter to that. Then you're not honoring yourself. You're not necessarily being honest with yourself about your natural capable abilities to do that. And there, in my experience, when you're not whole within yourself, you want something, you're overriding yourself almost, there's always friction. There's always drag. And there's always drama, to be frank, which is my least favorite part of it. But if you don't laugh, you cry. So there you go. And it's kind of painful. And I realize one of my values is I want to work with people who have integrity with themselves. And it, applies directly to self-awareness. If someone is clueless about themselves, they don't know how they're going to act, and therefore neither do you. You may have heard me say this before, but my one law, and I don't have very many, I don't have very many rules that I live by, but one of them is I trust people to the degree that I think they know themselves. And I had to add I think, because how do I know how much someone knows themselves? But I have to tell you, I have coached so many people on their profiles and all of the different ones. And I've tried to paint pictures of what it looks like and what it means, where they're going to really be in their quote unquote best self, and where they don't have mental or emotional or sometimes even physical energy. And I will point that out. And it really depends how seriously someone takes that. Either they believe it, if it counters what some of their, I'm going to use the word ambitions, or what their goals are, and if they don't like what I'm saying, or they think that what I'm pointing out isn't going to help them get there, they will disregard that information. They will disregard the profiles. They won't take them seriously. They'll generalize and think that their profile applies to everybody else. They'll be surprised to find out everyone's unique, which is interesting. And then they ultimately won't be successful. Now, they can get a long run in there. if you're smart, you can make this play and make it work for a long time. And it's not even a play that just is all about you. Sometimes you can convince other people as well. But at some point, either I think you are going to be unhappy, or you might feel like you're fine, but the people around you will not be happy. And what's kind of the worst case scenario is both those things are true. You're not happy and the people around you aren't happy. Although that is, at least there's a match between the inner and the outer. And at that point, if someone points out to you, hey, this isn't working, you might just say, yeah, I know, which is a very honest and courageous thing to say, because it means you have to stop and reflect and reevaluate and just appreciate the fact that, yeah, I'm actually out of integrity with myself, which means it's almost impossible to have integrity with anything on the outside. So I just think that's a really interesting way to think about it. And I really appreciate the model of the 3 parts of the mind that I learned in my Kolbe certification, which is that there is the cognitive, the affective, and the conative. So the cognitive, your brain, your mental horsepower, how sharp you are, that sort of thing. So that's, I guess, IQ, and there's different types of IQ, but that's kind of your, how good a thinker are you? How quickly do you learn new information? How long do you retain it for? Which is kind of interesting. I'm really good at learning new things. I'm also really good at forgetting new things. So making sure it's integrated into my being and my framework is a focus of mine. Other people are really slow to learn, but once it's in, it's in. Both of those are not a direct reflection of intelligence, different types of intelligence, but certain situations require certain types. So that's important to know as well. So that's the cognitive. Again, lots of measures for that. Go on the internet, you'll find tons. Then there's the affective. There's a cajillion profiles on this. And so this is, what does your heart telling you? What are your preferences? What are your likes? What are your dislikes? All of that is so important to pay attention to. Some of our favorites are Working Genius, which is a brilliant teamwork profile, but it's also very much your preferences. What brings you joy? I can't think of a more emotional word than that. What brings you frustration? What makes you feel competent? Clifton Strengths is another favorite of mine. Print profile, oh my gosh, so insightful, because it measures what are people's deepest motivations. And I find that it is actually the one I default to really understand and appreciate where someone's coming from and ultimately kind of where they should go and how their actions play out, because you can't get away from your inner source code. Your deepest motivation is what print measures. So I find it incredibly true to form. Some people who look, I was teasing a client the other day, who look very sweet, they're very nice, they're always smiling, they're happy, one person I think does an enormous amount of good in the world, and that when you sit down with them, he is one of the most ambitious, independent thinkers you will ever meet, or humans, forget even thinking. He is what's called print a 3-8, to succeed and achieve and to be strong and self-reliant. So he's going to be successful in his own unique way, and he is a driver. And you could pay attention to the personality on top, which is lovely. And then underneath, you better know he's going somewhere, and he's doing it in a very organized follow-through way. And it's like, I need to know that about him if I'm going to read him and understand him in a way that makes sense. Otherwise, I'm going to be surprised. Now, it turns out I love those 2 ways of being motivated, so that doesn't bother me at all. But I could grossly misread someone if I don't understand what their deepest motivations are. So print is phenomenal. I'm also certified in DISC, big fan of that. There's predictive index. There's a lot of different ways. Those are all the validated ones. And Myers-Briggs is another. And then the big 5. Goodness, there are a lot. And then there's the fun ones, which have almost no validity, but are highly entertaining, like which Avenger are you? So you can run the gamut on those. But then there's the one that measures how you will take action, how you strive, and how your mental energy plays out. And of course, that's Kolbe, KOLBE.com. And it's the only validated measurement for that. And what I love is that when Kathy and team were developing it, they completely stripped out anything that was correlate with intelligence and or with personality. And so it is such a clean measure of how people strive and take action when they're striving. When they're not striving, they need to restore and rest. So don't expect to see your striving instincts when you're resting. That is kind of not the point, but it's phenomenal. And when you combine those 3, and this is where, oh my gosh, ChatGPT and all the AIs are so fun and so useful, is you can put in your profiles. I would highly recommend adding in the definitions and, give it more information. You might want to say what your print numbers are and, what your Clifton strengths are. And it will compile them and merge them together into an incredibly cohesive, insightful picture of who you are. And then you can ask it, hey, what are positions? What are jobs? What are projects that will, be really fulfilling for me? What should I not be doing? Where will I not be satisfied or happy or successful? Get some coaching. I have to say, AI can be a phenomenal coach. I've heard it's also a good therapist. There's a lot of things that AI can give you some insight where you don't have to talk to someone, you don't have to be vulnerable with someone because you've got this LLM giving the ideas and computing what is a lot of complex information and distilling it down to practical actions for yourself. So that is another fun, newer way to know yourself. But then believe it. Believe it. Take yourself seriously. Take the feedback seriously. These are validated instruments, with the exception of which vendor are you, that make sense to pay attention to. And if you go back and take the information that you're summarizing and integrating, there's that word again, and then match it against your successful experiences in your past and then your less successful or unsuccessful experiences, you should see a match. That when you were crazily successful, you ticked all of these boxes. And when you were not successful or failed, put in the time and effort, did not get the result, it's because none of those things were true. You were going against your grain. And that's what caused a lack of success. So here's the deal. I want you to be whole. I want you to feel whole within yourself. I want you to be very, very clear on your capabilities, on your ambitions, on how to be successful your way. This is very individual to you. Here's where this takes some courage. It takes some, our 4 C's formula: commitment, courage, capability, and confidence. It takes a commitment to be true to yourself. It really does. You're figuring out what is most true about you, and then you want to keep that as the through line. But it takes courage because sometimes you realize what you are doing right now, the projects you're working on, with whom you're spending time, may not be a match for that. And that takes courage to look at yourself and look at the situation and go, there's a space there. There's some distance. This may be a short-term strategy, not a long-term strategy. And we all need to do things, if you're feeding your family, please go ahead and do that. But then just know that this is the true you. This is the real you. This is something you're doing, as a good parent, for example, but you don't have to put your whole identity. You don't have to put your self-worth into that. And you want to save that for your ambitions that really do allow you to be your best and most whole self. So I just found this idea of, do you have integrity with yourself? Integrity is normally, how are you showing up to the world? Are you trustworthy? Are you count-onable? Do you have consistency? But as we were talking and I was, connecting with some of my dear, dear friends in 10X, it was really clear that there's an internal version of this too. And again, thanks to Julia, connecting integrity with wholeness. And again, 100% her mission in the world is to help people realize this as well, is to really understand and appreciate and move forward in the future based on this information about what makes you whole. And it's so enriching. I get to see people reach incredible levels of success because they've stripped away those things that detract, that have that friction and drag. They really focus on the things that they're best at. They get into superb teamwork, which is the only way you can actually get to do your own unique ability, is to be in teamwork with people who are just as capable in their areas as you're not, right? You want them better than you would ever be in those complementary areas. That's the only thing that can free you up. And so I really do think that in order to experience our unique ability, we have to get superb at unique ability teamwork, the handoffs, the communication, what's required, all of those things. So it's just important to take seriously is the bottom line of what I want to say. So question for you as we wrap up this conversation: are you whole within yourself? Do you have integrity within yourself? And once you have that, it is very easy to be, do your word, be yourself, be your authentic self, because, well, why would you be anything else anyway, in my opinion? People can really trust that what they see is what they get with you. And I think people who have integrity with themselves show up differently. They have a different energy. They are calmer. My friend Kathy used the term capacity the other day. They have more capacity. They're less likely knocked off their center because they know who they are. And it encourages other people to have that same clarity and certainty about themselves. There is a whole different energy level, you can call it vibe, whatever, when you're with people who are really centered within themselves. And you also know what it's like to be around people who have no clue who they are, and their focus is external validation because they have no internal validation. They're easily swayed by the last person they talk to. They're all over the map. And you can't trust them because they don't know who they are. They don't know what they're going to do. I know the people with whom I would rather spend time, and you probably do as well. It's just so much easier to get stuff done. You can count on people. They have external integrity as well as internal. So yes, I'm on a mission to help everybody be that, but you have to be willing, and you have to be willing to take it seriously and to take yourself seriously. So that is the idea that I wanted to share with you. Are you whole within yourself? Have you integrated what is important to you and intellectually interesting along with what you care about, which probably educates what you are interested in? And then are you able and do you take action in the way that's most fulfilling and energizing for you? So when someone is aligned in those three areas, in terms of your mental capabilities, your cognitive, your affective, and your cognitive, I always know I have an aligned, happy, healthy, and contributing human being. That is my goal with everyone I talk to, is to get people in alignment with themselves, which is another way of saying integrity. So just wanted to share that idea with you. Very curious as to what you think. So if you have any questions or comments, please let me know at questions@strategiccoach.com. Thank you so much for listening. And as always, here's to your team success.